Let's dive right in. Today, we're exploring the architecture of a criminal empire, the syndicate of systemic loopholes, the rise of D Company. We aren't just looking at a simple timeline of a notorious figure here. We're breaking down how an entire ecosystem of loopholes, sheer ambition, and deep-rooted corruption nurtured one of the most formidable syndicates in modern history. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this story, you have to look at this staggering, almost unbelievable trajectory. On one end, you have 1955, a head constable's son born in the cramped, damp alleys of a Dongri slum in Bombay. Fast forward to today, you're looking at a man sitting safely in a palace, designated by the United Nations as a global terrorist, with a massive $25 million US bounty on his head. I mean, how on earth do we get from point A to point B? Well, it starts right here. December 26, 1955, in Temkar Mahalla, Dongri. Back in the 60s, this was a place where poverty and crime basically slept under the same blanket. His father, Ibrahim Kaskar, was a highly respected, honest CID head constable. But that honest pay was barely enough to feed 10 kids. And Dawood? He wasn't exactly drawn to schoolbooks. He was drawn to the streets of Dongri. The sources tell us that at just 14 years old, he pulled his first robbery, snatching cash right on the street. When his dad found out, he actually beat Dawood with a leather belt until his back bled, desperately trying to protect the honor of his uniform. But it didn't reform him. Instead, it ignited this quiet, incredibly dangerous rebellion. So when Dawood steps away from a regular, honest job at Manish Market, he's walking into a terrifying, already established hierarchy. The Bombay underworld was built on three massive pillars. You had Haji Mastan, famous for his all-white clothes, white Mercedes, and direct political ties. Then there was Yusuf Patel, who was the undeclared king of the Kandla port. And finally, the most ruthless of them all, Karim Lala. He was an Afghan migrant from the 1920s who ran the fearsome Pathan gang. They controlled everything: gambling, liquor, contract killings. This was the terrifying corporate ladder of the streets. But what really catapulted him? A staggering 400%. The Indian government imposed this massive customs duty on gold to try and control the economy, but it totally backfired. It inadvertently turned gold smuggling between Dubai and Bombay into an absolute gold mine. It created a massive black market practically overnight, and that friction is exactly what Dawood exploited when he entered the fray, initially doing small smuggling runs. And here's where we get to the real Frankenstein element of our story. Dawood brilliantly leveraged the fact that he was a police constable's son. He started building these strategic relationships with customs and police officials. The police thought, hey, we can use Dawood's insider tips to crush the powerful Pathan gang. But Dawood's objective? Completely different. He traded minor tips to get immunity for his own crimes, and literally used the police as a weapon to systematically wipe out his rivals. Talk about a lethal loophole, right? It was a perfectly symbiotic relationship, and he was using it as a ladder. Part 1. D Company, the corporate cartel. Dawood realized pretty quickly that he could never be the undisputed king working for someone else. But he didn't just build a typical street gang. He built a highly structured, multinational corporate model. Think of it like a Fortune 500 company for crime. D Company had actual departments. Logistics handled the smuggling and transport, led by directors like Tiger Maiman. Finance took care of real estate and extortion under Chota Shakil. They even had an entertainment division financing Bollywood films. This wasn't random street thuggery. This was a heavily compartmentalized, sophisticated corporate cartel. Part 2. Blood in Bombay's streets. Now, when a corporate structure like that clashes with rival street forces, you get a brutal escalation. It kicks off in February 1981. Dawood's older brother Shabir gets gunned down at a Prabhadevi petrol pump by Amirzada and Alam Zeb from the Pathan gang. Just 1 hour later, they try to take out Dawood, but he narrowly survives. And his revenge? Totally strategic. Instead of a direct hit, he gives a precise tip to the police. That led to 18 crime branch officers cornering the dangerous gangster Manya Survey at Wadala in January 1982, which, by the way, was Bombay's first official police encounter. Then, in September 1983, the retaliation reaches an unprecedented level. Dawood actually pays a 20-year-old unemployed guy named David to assassinate Amirzada right inside a sessions court, in broad daylight. It completely shattered the psychological framework of the whole city. So between 1981 and 1985, we are looking at an absolute bloodbath. Over 50 gangsters killed on the streets of Bombay. Between fake cases, police encounters, and targeted hits, the once mighty Pathan gang is completely wiped out. Dawood emerges as the undisputed kingpin. And he wasn't just ruling the streets anymore. The sources note that by the mid-80s, he basically bought the system. Police, the judiciary, and politicians were on his payroll, and top lawyers like Ram Jethmalani were handling his legal battles. This intense systemic corruption all culminates in the infamous 1986 escape. The Supreme Court had issued a non-bailable warrant, and Police Commissioner D.S. Soman had secretly planned a massive raid at Dawood's Musafirkhana hideout. This was supposed to be the end of the line, but just hours before the raid, a top official from inside the police department tips Dawood off. It's the ultimate systemic failure. He slips right through their fingers and flees to Dubai forever. And out in Dubai, his whole life transforms. He's no longer a street thug. He's ruling from these incredible white palaces. It's almost surreal. He's using modern telephones and satellite communication to control Bombay remotely with terrifying efficiency. And those lavish parties he threw, attending them actually became a twisted status symbol for major Bollywood stars, politicians, and businessmen. He was completely untouchable. Part 3. The 1993 Bombay bombings. This is where we see the dark transition from mafia don to international terrorist. It's crucial we look at the timeline here. In December 1992, the demolition of the Babri Masjid leads to horrific communal riots in Bombay, leaving over 900 dead. The underworld, which previously was just united by money, suddenly fractured along communal lines. Pakistan's ISI weaponized that anger. On January 19, 1993, Dawood, Tiger Memon, and the ISI meet in Dubai, and the blueprint for devastation is drawn up. The result was 3,000 kilograms of RDX and AK-56 rifles arriving via the coastlines of Gujarat and Maharashtra. All of that meticulous planning led to March 12, 1993. At exactly 1:30 p.m., a car packed with RDX exploded in the basement of the Bombay Stock Exchange. Over the next 2 hours, 12 separate blasts ripped through iconic locations across the city, places like Plaza Cinema, Zaveri Bazaar, and the Air India building. This actually marked the very first time time pencil detonators were ever used in India. And the human cost was just devastating. 257. That is the number of innocent citizens who lost their lives that day, with another 10,400 injured. And every bit of it was orchestrated by a man sitting completely safe miles away in Dubai. Part 4. The syndicate fractures. Now that mass murder of innocents crossed a massive line, causing a deep ideological split right down the middle of D Company. In 1993, Dawood's absolute most trusted confidant, Chota Rajan, broke away, stating he just couldn't bear the burden of innocent blood. This triggered a bloody global manhunt between the two factions. Fast forward to September 2000, Dawood's hitmen track Rajan to a hotel in Bangkok and fire 48 bullets into his room. Unbelievably, Rajan escapes through the roof. It wasn't until October 2015, after 27 years on the run, that Rajan was finally arrested in Bali, Indonesia. Meanwhile, Dawood's usefulness to foreign intelligence was evolving. Around 1994, he's actually shifted from Dubai to Karachi, where the ISI puts him under a really tight security blanket. Why? Because he had become a prime weapon in a proxy war. That's a conflict where a major power uses a third party to fight on its behalf, so they avoid direct involvement. He was literally being used as a weapon against India. But that international shelter inevitably brought intense global scrutiny. On November 3, 2003, the United Nations Security Council officially declares Dawood Ibrahim a global terrorist, and the United States placed that massive $25 million bounty on his head. Which leaves us with a really profound question to reflect upon today. How does a system meant to protect its citizens end up nurturing the very monster that destroys them? From the cramped alleys of Dongri to a palace in Karachi, Dawood Ibrahim's rise wasn't just a triumph of sheer criminal ambition. It was actively fueled by the complicity, the corruption, and the loopholes of the system itself. He still sits safely today mocking the law. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the structures around you, and I'll see you next time.